Before we get started, I want to thank you for listening to Not Suitable for Work. If you haven't, take a quick second to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Welcome to Not Suitable for Work. I'm your host, Peter C. Diamond. You think your office is nuts? Wait until you hear some of these stories.
It's a story I tell people as a cautionary tale of what not to do in a pressure-filled situation.
And there's nothing like making a joke and looking at a room full of people who, are just stone-faced, and they know that you blew it.
What about our professional dynamic has given you a license to act in this way?
We're driving, and it's taking a while. And I realize I don't think I'm going to be making it back to my hotel.
With each podcast, I interview folks who have a humorous work story to share. Along the way, I'll offer advice to help you make sense of your own office nonsense. Don't worry, no careers were harmed in making Not Suitable for Work. Names and places may have been changed to protect the not so innocent. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. What if your boss refuses to accept your resignation? Seriously, what would you do if your boss won't let you quit? This happened to my guest, Paul Farahvar, comedian, podcast host, and lawyer. Always a prankster, Paul tries everything to get fired from his sales job.
I think at that time, Nordstrom used to have a couple big sales. They would have like their half-yearly sale and then the men's clearance, which was like these 2 weeks where they would be packed. People would be lined up to get in, and they needed extra help. That's where I was. I was like seasonal help, but then also stayed on after. So the first event, whatever it was, the half-yearly or whatever it was in Nordstrom, I worked it, and my boss loved me, and he's like, I want you on whatever days you want, you're on. And I was a good worker. I mean, I'm pretty, I have a good work ethic instilled in me. So, and I was like, cool. Yeah, I can use the extra money, and I like working here. It was an easy job. A lot of time was downtime, especially when there wasn't the sale. You're just sitting around, just goofing around. And this is before cell phones. So you'd have to do things to entertain yourself. But then, somewhere in the middle of the summer, I got into law school, University of Illinois, which was the place I really wanted to get into. And I was like, this is, at the time, was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it was going back to where I went to undergrad. I was in a band at the time, and all my bandmates were going to be in Champaign. I was like, cool, I could still play in a band. I could still go to law school and work at a bar. I was going to work at a bar at the time. I was like, cool, well, that means I have like 1.5 months left of the summer. And I was like, I need to quit this job. So I went to my boss. I'm like, hey, I want to leave. He's like, no, I'm not letting you leave. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we still have 1 week left of this, whatever the anniversary sale or men's thing. And you're like the best. And all the other sales guys liked me and saleswomen liked me because I would ring them up if I sold something. I would just give them their commission because I was like, I don't care. I mean,
so were you when you gave, like, were you just hoping to leave? So when you said, hey, I'm done.
I just wanted to leave.
You were just like, yeah, peace out. I'm done.
Yeah. I didn't want to leave on bad terms because also my friend got me the job because she was high end at the company. Her family worked there, and I didn't want to leave on bad terms. And that's something that resonates with me to this day. I'll never do that, and I always want to treat people with respect. But I also wanted to leave. I really wanted to leave, and I think maybe there was like a concert or something I wanted to do, and I was like, I want to go to these things. I want to like see my friends before I go to college or law school. And he was like, no, I need you. He's like, and I was like, I don't want to be here. Like, and it was kind of like funny in a way. Like we joke about it, and he'd be like, "Go, can you do this?" I'd be just like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And then he'd just look at me. I'm like, "All right, fine." Like he would ask me to do things, but I would do them, but reluctantly, and I would just mope and stuff. So he would like say, "All right, you're done," but he wouldn't fire me. So I would start doing things like one thing I did, which I kind of regret, was you could call into the Nordstrom office downstairs and like from a help desk and just say something, so they would announce it over the whole store. And I would do that like stupid like Simpsons names. I'm like, I lost my mom. Amanda was her first name, Hug and Kiss. And then you'd hear Amanda Hug and Kiss, please come to, and then like we would just start dying. And he knew it was me. And I'd be like, you can't prove if I did or not. Like, and just kind of jokingly do things like that, or like set things up to just kind of sabotage in a way.
Was this the beginning of your comedy career, or?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it was something where I always liked playing practical jokes on people, and that was my way of kind of acting out. Because even when I was in high school, I would do things. I was always like, not a class clown, but I would do goofy things or like campaign on behalf of the students. But like, hey, can we have, if we're all good this week, can we have like a party for the last day on Fridays? And like I would negotiate with the teachers, but I'd always be in good graces with the teachers. I always wanted to like play it safe. So as much as a troublemaker as I was, I'd always be like the teacher's pet at the same time. And the same thing with the boss. Like I wanted to be in good graces with him, but I also would like push the envelope as far as possible before like he lost it. And that's what I did. I would do that every day until like he finally was like, all right, 2 more days and then you could leave. And then he let me leave at like, I think it was like the middle of July.
So that was, so you finally, you pushed it to.
Yeah, I did
limit.
enough.
Was there something that finally, he finally got the hint and said,
yeah,
okay.
I think when it started affecting, just like the floor, like I would set up things in a weird way, like a triangle, like it was just like the shapes would be weird. Like you're supposed to set things in a complete row. I would set it up in a weird way and make like a design. The calls to Nordstrom downstairs kind of pissed him off as well. But I mean, he would kind of be laughing too, because like, I know that was you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't even hear what they said. But it was like, yeah, it was like subtle jabs, but also just trying to be playful. But I wanted to leave, so on good terms.
Yeah, and so this was, so at this point when you were in the shoe department too,
Men's
right?
shoes, yeah.
So was there any practical jokes or anything that you played on customers, or was it more?
No, I never did anything to customers. I was just there were certain salesmen that I really liked, and I would always take care of them. So like if I sold something on the floor, if I put in my number, I don't get credit for it. So just all of a sudden, I remembered the sales guys that I liked, and I would give them the credit for the sale so they can get commission on it. And that kind of was cool. There were a couple of people I didn't like, so I would mess with them, but nothing aggressive. Just I'm trying to think, like calls would come in, and I would just I'd be like, do I want to go get him, or I just be like, nah, I'm not gonna get him. I'd be like, I don't know where he is, or I'd be like, I don't think he works here anymore. But nothing malicious other than that one. And
then from the same time that you were also I'm curious though, so during this time dealing with this, like what would you say you were learning just about management?
Well, I think the one thing I learned was he spotted talent, and I think at one point he didn't think I was gonna. He was like, well, I don't know if you want to be a lawyer. Maybe this is because he saw that I was good at sales, and he's like, this is something you can do, and you're good at it. And I think he kind of wanted to mentor me into sales and into management and into the Nordstrom family. And I was just like, and at the time when I didn't get into the law school, I thought I was going to do that for a year. And I was like, okay, this will work. And I remember I also was looking at sales there was a store called Blockbuster Music back then. It was Blockbuster Videos, and then they went into the music, and I loved music, and I got a job in a record store, which was like my dream job. But then they took a hair sample for a drug test, and I failed the drug test because I smoked pot in college. So he knew that too, and he was like, oh, whatever, we'll hire you. So, yeah, I mean, in a way, I think he thought I was going to stay in sales. And when I got into law school, I was like, well, now I have music. I thought I was going to be a rock star. I was like, if rock star doesn't work, law was going to be my backup plan. And then sales was no longer on the table.
So how do you now think about like things like humor and like humor in the workplace?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you balance that?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I separate my professional life from when I was working as a lawyer and then doing comedy at night. I would try to separate the two for a long time. I didn't disclose. I was very private about my comedy, and I wouldn't tell other people. And then my friends would actually make fun of me. I had a friend who'd be like, "Oh, but I'd be like, oh, you can't post that. My clients might see it." And then at some point, I was just like, I don't think it matters. Like, people have their separate lives, and if my client is going to judge me for that, then so be it. And a lot of that goes back to the Nordstrom thing. It's like he knew I was a hard worker. He knew that I showed up on time. I did the work. I was probably one of the best clerks they had. But he also knew like I had a personality, and that I was an individual in a lot of ways, and he allowed me to do that, and maybe to some detriment to him, but it never affected the work. And I think he showed me the numbers when I was there. We got through more sales than they ever did.
Wow.
So maybe it was positive. Maybe I kept people loose and stuff. I don't know.
And then so today you still practice law, correct?
I do, yeah, part-time.
Mm-hmm. And how does that work with this, with your comedy and the other things that you do?
Well, what I've learned now, if I can go back to 20 years ago, I'm just like, I could have just stayed on and worked that whole time and still partied and had fun. You learn time management, especially people. When I work with comedians, especially on stuff, I'm like, hey, let's do this, and this. Like, oh, I don't have time. I'm like, how do you not have time? Like, I have 3 jobs, and I can put aside 5 minutes to post something on Instagram to promote our show. But rather than making that a teachable moment for them, I'm just like, it's easier for me to just do it. I'm just like, I'm not going to try to help you. So,
well, I think what's interesting is when you talked about how you separated your comedy and your law work. Mm-hmm. So when that merged together, because I want to talk about when that merged together, was there any blowback? Was there any? Did any clients leave?
No.
Or
well, I quit my law firm. I definitely I was a partner at a law firm, and I left to pursue comedy and things that are associated with comedy. There was some negative feelings, obviously, when you build up a law firm. I was a named partner in a firm, and I think there was some animosity. But as far as clients are concerned, what I've learned is the clients that have stayed with me, they just want good work. And there definitely were certain clients who are like concerned, like, wait a minute, how are you going to work on this trial when you're doing stand-up comedy every night? And I think they saw the product and the work ethic that I put in, and the time commitment I have, and they stayed on. So there wasn't I thought there would be a lot. Going back to your question, when I was hesitant to make it public that I was pursuing this thing, I thought there would be a lot of blowback, and surprisingly, there wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the concerns I had about doing this podcast.
Yeah,
because as an executive coach, I'm trying to be serious and help leaders be better leaders and work with teams and help people sort out their careers. It tends to have a little bit of a serious tone to it, although I try to make it as light as I can. But I was really concerned about doing this podcast because here I am asking people to tell funny work stories,
right?
And I wasn't sure, and so I didn't pursue it for probably 2 years because I thought, how could I manage both of these? And the interesting thing has been, everyone is like, well, why wouldn't you do it? And there hasn't been any kind of blowback since I've done it. I probably haven't completely integrated them, but there hasn't been any concerns.
I would encourage, and from at least from what I've learned is, when I started comedy, it was going to be a purely just a hobby. It was fun. And then when I started with improv, And if anything, that made me a better lawyer. And I remember my first jury trial after I had completed improv, my closing argument, I was like, man, I wish I recorded that. Like it was one of my best sets, because I was like, it was the fastest response, jury verdict I got. And, I've tried 20 jury trials, and I think comedy helped me. And I would say the same thing about a podcast, or it makes you human. And I think towards the end of when I was practicing law, I started promoting the fact that I was a comedian to my clients, and it made me an individual to them. Because the way I see it, and maybe I'm wrong, I would think that me being an individual and having this hobby and having this thing that is related to law in a way, it's public speaking, it's comfort. People get to know you, and you're selling yourself as a stand-up comedian, just as you're selling a case to your client, to the jury or a judge. You can see that it's related. And I would make the argument the same holds true for a podcast if you're an executive coach, because you're providing a service to people as you are as an executive coach.
Yeah, and I wanted to do, when you talked about being human, I also wanted to do a podcast around coaching, but workplace that was a little bit more human, and that would allow people to talk about the human side of things that happen in a workplace and that they experience, more so than what a traditional coach may do with somebody who is more of a professional and seems very buttoned up. And I think it's good to bring the humanity into at least for me, into this podcast and into my coaching.
Yeah, I think anything along the lines of expressions of showing, your individuality or empathy, anything along those lines, or even just being looking at things. The one thing I say that it's something I try to live by, and I'm not claiming that I created this, but it's, if you can't laugh at yourself, you're doing it wrong. And that's something that I always say and always think. I'm like, okay, all of this doesn't matter. I mean, everything at the end, it's not going to matter. You just have to stay on this planet and do what you can, and leave some sort of legacy. And I think that's what you do, whether you're an executive coach or selling shoes at Nordstrom. I don't know.
Right. Paul Farahvar, thank you very much
Thanks
for being
for
on
having
Not
me,
Suitable
Peter.
for Work.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully I didn't ruin it for everybody.
Paul's story is a great reminder that bosses want to keep good people as long as they can. Being a good performer gives you leverage to negotiate for a raise, a flexible work schedule, or other perks. And it comes in handy if you decide to boomerang back to a previous employer. I've done it twice, successfully. According to a recent Forbes article, 3 out of 4 employers would rehire a former employee. Why? It's simple. They get it. They know the culture, the systems, the idiosyncrasies. They're a known entity with strong relationships, and they can bring back fresh ideas and perspectives from where they worked. So my advice, always leave on good terms. Tie up any loose ends, help your successor succeed, be gracious during your exit interview, send a thoughtful farewell email, be kind on social media, no trash talking, and stay connected. It's a small world after all. Thanks again to this week's guest, Paul Farahvar. Check out Paul's podcast, Singles Only, and his website, paulfcomedy.com, to find out when he's performing. If you want more Not Suitable for Work or have a work story to share, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Not Suitable for Work. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcast. If you have a question you want answered on a future episode, call us at 872-256-0827. I'm Peter C. Diamond. You can follow me on Twitter at Peter C. Diamond. Not Suitable for Work is produced by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Until next time.